My name is Riley, and I'm about to tell you the story of how I fell in love with the most infuriating person I've ever met. It started with a noise complaint at 2 a.m. It ended with me realizing that sometimes the person who drives you absolutely crazy is the only person who makes you feel completely alive. This is the story of how my organized, predictable life got turned upside down by an artist with paint in her hair and chaos in her soul. And the craziest part? I wouldn't change a single moment of it. Before we continue, I want to make a special request to you. If you're a person with a good heart, help us achieve this dream. Reach 1,000 subscribers. Subscribe to the channel. Also, leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from, so I know how far this beautiful story is reaching. September 15th, 2024. I've always believed that life follows a pattern. Wake up at 6:30 a.m., shower, coffee at 7:00, arrive at school by 8:15, teach my 4th grade class with precision and care, grade papers in the evening, and sleep by 10:30 p.m. Weekends are for meal prep, laundry, and organizing my apartment. Everything has its place. Everything has its time. That's how I've managed to build a life that feels safe, controlled, and predictable. That was before I moved to Brooklyn. The apartment on Prospect Place seemed perfect when I first saw it. A 1-bedroom with exposed brick, large windows that let in natural light, hardwood floors, and a rent that, while expensive, was manageable on a teacher's salary. The landlord, Mr. Chen, was friendly and professional. The neighborhood had coffee shops, bookstores, and tree-lined streets. It felt like the kind of place where a woman in her late 20s could finally feel like she was building something real. I spent my first week unpacking methodically, books organized by genre, kitchen utensils arranged by frequency of use, clothes sorted by color and season. My coworkers had always teased me about my organizational obsession, but I saw it as self-respect. A clean space meant a clear mind. A clear mind meant control over my life. Everything was perfect until 2:47 a.m. on September 22nd. I was jolted awake by music so loud that my bedroom walls seemed to vibrate. Not just loud, aggressive. It was some kind of indie rock, with a bass line that pounded through the ceiling like a heartbeat that refused to stop. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, waiting for it to end. It didn't. 20 minutes passed, 30, 45. At 3:15 a.m., I got out of bed, pulled on my cardigan over my pajamas, and stood in my living room, hands on my hips, trying to decide what to do. Calling the police seemed extreme. Knocking on the door at this hour seemed confrontational. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I grabbed a pen and paper and wrote a note. Dear upstairs neighbor, I understand that you may enjoy music, but some of us have to work in the morning. Please keep the volume at a reasonable level after 10 p.m. Thank you for your consideration. Riley, Apartment 2B. I taped it to their door with a piece of painter's tape I found in the hallway, which should have been my first clue about who lived there, and returned to bed. The music stopped 15 minutes later. I didn't sleep well. The next morning, I woke up to find a note slipped under my door. The handwriting was chaotic, all loops and flourishes, the complete opposite of my careful script. Dear downstairs neighbor, sorry about last night. I was working on something and lost track of time. It won't happen again. Morgan, Apartment 3B, P.S. Your note was very formal. Do you smile? I read it 3 times, unsure whether to be annoyed or amused. The tone was casual, almost flippant. And that P.S.? It felt like a challenge. I didn't respond. I had papers to grade. But it happened again. Not the next night, but the night after that. Different music, something that sounded like it was being played through a synthesizer, but equally loud and equally inconsiderate. This time I didn't write a note. I went upstairs. The door to 3B was painted a deep teal color, covered in stickers and doodles. There was a small chalkboard next to the doorbell that read, "Morgan's Creative Chaos. Enter at your own risk." I took a breath, knocked firmly, and waited. The door swung open, and I came face to face with the most beautiful disaster I'd ever seen. She was tall, probably around my height, with shoulder-length dark hair that looked like it hadn't seen a brush in days. She was wearing paint-splattered overalls over a faded band t-shirt, and her hands were literally covered in what appeared to be acrylic paint in shades of blue and gold. Her eyes were dark brown, almost black, and they looked at me with an expression somewhere between amusement and curiosity. "Let me guess," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "You're the formal note lady from downstairs." "I'm Riley," I said, trying to maintain my composure despite the fact that I was standing in the hallway in my work clothes, while she looked like she'd just crawled out of an art studio. Which, judging by the paint, she probably had. "And yes, I'm the one who left the note. It's 2 a.m. Some of us have to work in the morning." "I know what time it is," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice even though her expression remained neutral. "I'm Morgan, and I'm sorry about the music. I was working on a commission, and I get into this zone where I lose track of everything. Time, volume, basic human decency, the usual." Despite my frustration, I felt my lips twitch. She was being deliberately charming, and it was working. "It's 2 a.m., I repeated, as if that would somehow make her understand the severity of the situation. "You already said that," Morgan observed, "and I already apologized. So either we're going to stand here and repeat ourselves all night, or you could come in for a second and see why I was so distracted." I should have said no. I should have gone back downstairs, written another note, and reported her to Mr. Chen. Instead, I found myself following her into the apartment. It was chaos. Beautiful, vibrant, intentional chaos. The walls were covered in paintings, some finished, some clearly works in progress. There were canvases stacked against every surface, jars of brushes and paint tubes scattered across tables, and in the corner of the living room, a large canvas was stretched out, half covered in a stunning abstract painting of a woman's face emerging from a storm of blues and golds. "Oh," I said, unable to stop myself. "Yeah," Morgan said, watching my face. "That's what I was working on. It's for a gallery showing in Williamsburg next month. I know it doesn't excuse the noise, but at least now you know I'm not just playing music to annoy you." "I didn't think you were," I lied. Morgan laughed, a real, genuine laugh that somehow made the whole situation feel less tense. "You absolutely did, and honestly, fair. I would too." We stood there for a moment, looking at the painting. Up close, I could see the detail in it, the way the colors seemed to move and shift depending on the angle. It was extraordinary. "It's beautiful," I said quietly. "Thank you," Morgan replied, and when I looked at her, she was watching me, not the painting. "I promise I'll keep the volume down after 10 p.m., and I'll try to remember that not everyone is a night owl artist who thinks 2 a.m. is a reasonable time to be awake." "I appreciate that," I said, suddenly very aware of how close we were standing. "I should get back downstairs. I have lesson plans to finish." "At 3 a.m.? Morgan asked, one eyebrow raised. "I couldn't sleep," I admitted. "Because of my music?" "Yes." "Then maybe you should stay for a few minutes," Morgan said, moving toward her kitchen. "I'll make coffee. The least I can do is compensate you for the lost sleep." I should have left. Every rational part of my brain was screaming at me to go back downstairs and stick to my routine. But there was something about Morgan, something chaotic and unpredictable and utterly fascinating that made me want to stay. "Just for a few minutes," I said. Morgan smiled, and I realized it was the first time I'd seen her genuinely smile. It transformed her entire face. "Just for a few minutes," she agreed. We sat on her worn leather couch, drinking coffee from mismatched mugs at 3:30 in the morning, and I listened to her talk about her art, her dreams of getting into a major gallery, her philosophy that life was too short to live it safely. Everything she said was the opposite of everything I believed, and yet I found myself hanging on every word. When I finally left her apartment, the sun was beginning to rise over Brooklyn. I had 2 hours before I needed to be at school. I had no lesson plans prepared, and I was smiling. That was the moment everything changed. I just didn't know it yet. September 28th, 2024. A week had passed since the night I went to Morgan's apartment, and I hadn't slept properly since. Not because of the music. She'd kept her promise about keeping the volume down after 10 p.m., but because I couldn't stop thinking about her. This was not like me. I didn't develop crushes. I didn't get distracted. I was focused, driven, and completely in control of my emotions. And yet, here I was, finding excuses to run into her in the hallway, hoping she'd be checking her mail when I came home from school. It was pathetic, and I knew it. On Saturday morning, I was at my favorite coffee shop on Prospect Avenue, the one I'd been going to every weekend for the past 3 weeks, when Morgan walked in. She was wearing paint-splattered jeans and a sweater that had a hole in the sleeve, and her hair was piled on top of her head in what could only be described as a chaotic bun. She looked absolutely terrible. I thought she was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. "Riley!" she exclaimed, spotting me immediately. "I didn't know you came here." "Every Saturday," I said, trying to sound casual. "It's the best coffee in the neighborhood." "I've been coming here for 6 months," Morgan said, ordering something that sounded incredibly complicated from the barista. "How have we never run into each other before?" "Luck?" I suggested, and she laughed. "Or fate," she said, turning to look at me with that expression that made my stomach do flips. "Mind if I sit with you?" Of course I minded. Sitting with her meant I'd have to pretend I hadn't been thinking about her constantly for the past week. It meant I'd have to maintain a normal conversation while internally freaking out about the way she bit her lower lip when she was thinking. "Sure," I said. We talked for 2 hours. Morgan told me about her commission, about how she'd grown up in Portland with 2 dads who were both artists, about how she'd moved to New York 5 years ago to pursue her dream of becoming a real artist, whatever that meant. I told her about my childhood in Connecticut, about how my parents were both accountants and had raised me to believe that stability and planning were the keys to happiness. "And are they?" Morgan asked, stirring her coffee. "The keys to happiness?" "I thought they were," I said carefully. "But lately, I'm not so sure." Morgan smiled, and I felt my heart skip a beat. "I think you're starting to figure out that happiness isn't something you can plan for. It's something that happens when you're not looking." "That sounds terrifying," I said. "It is," Morgan agreed, "but it's also kind of amazing." We exchanged phone numbers that day. By Sunday, we were texting. By Monday, Morgan had invited me to come to her apartment for dinner. By Friday, I realized I was completely, utterly, and impossibly in love with her. The problem was, I had no idea if she felt the same way. Morgan was naturally affectionate with everyone. She hugged people she'd just met, called strangers honey and babe, and had a way of making everyone around her feel like they were the most important person in the world. With me, She was the same way. There were no special moments, no lingering touches, no indication that what I was feeling was reciprocated. I was spiraling, and I knew it. On the second Friday of October, Morgan invited me to a gallery opening in Williamsburg. It was her first official showing, and she'd been working toward it for months. I bought a new dress, something I never did, and spent an hour on my hair, which I also never did. The gallery was packed. Morgan's paintings were displayed on white walls, spotlit and beautiful. There was a small crowd gathered around each piece, discussing technique and meaning and emotion. I stood in the corner, nursing a glass of wine, watching Morgan move through the crowd in a black dress that made her look sophisticated and dangerous and completely unlike herself. She was talking to a woman I didn't recognize. The woman was beautiful in that effortless way that some people are, with long blonde hair and a knowing smile. She had her hand on Morgan's arm, and they were laughing about something I couldn't hear. I felt something twist in my chest. Jealousy. Unmistakable and ugly. "That's Claire," a voice said next to me. I turned to see a man in his 30s with kind eyes and a knowing expression. Morgan's ex. They dated for about a year before Claire decided she wanted someone more stable. "Oh," I said, not sure how to respond. "I'm David, by the way," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Morgan's best friend, and you must be Riley. Morgan's talked about you constantly for the past 2 weeks." My heart jumped. "She has?" "Oh yeah," David said, grinning. "She's completely smitten. It's actually kind of hilarious because Morgan never gets smitten. She's usually the one doing the smittening, if that's a word." "I don't think it is," I said weakly. "Well, whatever," David said. "The point is, she likes you. A lot. She's just terrified because she's been hurt before, and you seem like the kind of person who has your life together, and she's worried she's too much chaos for someone like you." Before I could respond, Morgan appeared at my side, linking her arm through mine. "Come on," she said. "I want to show you something." She led me to a back room of the gallery, away from the crowd. On the wall was a painting I hadn't seen before. It was the one I'd seen her working on that first night, the woman's face emerging from the storm of blues and golds. But now, looking at it in the gallery lighting, I could see that the face was mine. "Morgan," I breathed. "I know," she said quietly. "I know I probably shouldn't have done this without asking, but I needed to. I needed to paint you because you're the only thing I can think about, and I'm terrified because I've never felt this way before, and I don't know how to do this without messing it up." I turned to look at her, and she was watching me with an expression of pure vulnerability. "Do what?" I asked, even though I knew the answer. "Fall in love with someone," she said. "I'm falling in love with you, Riley, and I'm completely terrified, but I can't keep pretending I'm not." My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. Every organized, controlled part of me was screaming that this was a mistake, that Morgan was chaos and unpredictability and everything I'd spent my life avoiding. But the part of me that had come alive in the past month, the part that had learned to laugh at 3 a.m. and appreciate beauty in chaos, knew exactly what to do. I kissed her. It was soft and tentative at first. A question. Then Morgan's hands came up to cup my face, and she kissed me back with a certainty that made my knees weak. When we finally pulled apart, we were both smiling. "I'm falling in love with you too," I whispered. "Yeah?" Morgan asked, hope blooming across her face. "Yeah," I confirmed. "I have been for weeks. I just didn't know how to admit it." Morgan pulled me close, and I rested my head on her shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of paint and coffee and something uniquely Morgan. Outside the gallery, The city hummed with life. Inside, it felt like the whole world had shifted on its axis. "This is going to be complicated," Morgan said into my hair. "I know," I replied, "but I think it might be worth it." "I think so too," Morgan said. And then she kissed me again, and I stopped thinking about complications altogether. October 20th, 2024. 3 weeks into dating Morgan, I was beginning to understand what people meant when they talked about the honeymoon phase. Everything felt magical and new. We'd spend hours talking, exploring the city, discovering new coffee shops and hidden parks. Morgan would paint while I graded papers, and we'd exist in comfortable silence, occasionally looking up to smile at each other. It was everything I'd never known I wanted. And then reality crashed in. It started small. Morgan was late to dinner, not just a few minutes late, 45 minutes late. She'd forgotten we had plans because she'd been working on a new piece and lost track of time. I'd made reservations at a restaurant I'd been planning to go to for weeks. We lost our table. "I'm sorry," Morgan said when she finally arrived, paint still under her fingernails. "I just got so into it, and I didn't realize." "It's fine," I said. But it wasn't fine. It was the first crack in my carefully constructed fantasy. Then there was the issue of her apartment. I'd been spending most nights at her place because my apartment was smaller and quieter, and Morgan liked having me there. But her apartment was a disaster. Dishes piled in the sink, laundry scattered across the bedroom floor, takeout containers from restaurants I didn't recognize stacked on the kitchen counter. I found myself cleaning without being asked, organizing her art supplies, throwing away old food. One night after I'd spent 3 hours cleaning her apartment while she worked on a painting, I snapped. "Morgan, I can't keep doing this," I said. "I'm not your mother. I'm not your maid. I have my own life, my own apartment, my own responsibilities." Morgan looked up from her canvas, confusion crossing her face. "What are you talking about? I never asked you to clean anything." "Exactly," I said, my voice rising. "You didn't ask. You just didn't notice. You don't notice anything that doesn't directly relate to your art. You didn't notice that I've been grading papers on your couch while sitting next to a pile of dirty laundry. You didn't notice that I rearranged your entire kitchen so I could actually find a clean plate. You didn't notice that I'm slowly losing my mind trying to maintain some semblance of order in the chaos that is your life." Morgan set down her brush, and I could see the hurt flash across her face. "That's not fair. I'm not responsible for your mental health, Riley." "I know that," I said, my anger deflating into something more like despair. "But I'm also not responsible for managing yours, and that's what I'm doing. I'm managing your life while you paint and pretend that the real world doesn't exist." "Is that what you think I'm doing?" Morgan asked quietly. "Pretending the real world doesn't exist?" "I don't know," I said, sinking onto the couch. "I don't know what you're doing anymore. I thought I understood you. But the more time I spend with you, the more I realize that you're just chaotic. And I can't live like this. I can't be the only one trying to make this work." Morgan was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe you're right," she said finally. "Maybe I'm too much. Maybe I'm not capable of being in a real relationship with someone who needs stability and order and normalcy." "That's not what I'm saying," I said. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure it was true. We didn't break up that night, but something shifted. The magic faded, replaced by a kind of careful distance. We still spent time together, but it felt different. Morgan was trying. She'd clean up before I came over. She'd set phone reminders for our plans. She'd ask about my day, and actually listen, instead of getting distracted by a painting idea. But it felt forced, like she was performing the role of good girlfriend instead of just being herself. And I realized, with a sinking feeling, that I didn't want that. I didn't want Morgan to change. I wanted her to be exactly who she was, chaotic and unpredictable and utterly infuriating. But I also wanted her to care enough about me to try. And I wanted to care enough about her to accept her as she was, without needing her to be someone else. The problem was, I didn't know if that was possible. On October 20th, exactly 3 weeks after our first kiss, I was sitting in my apartment, staring at my phone, trying to figure out how to fix something that might be fundamentally broken. Morgan had texted earlier asking if I wanted to come over. I'd said I was tired. She'd said okay, and that was it. No follow-up, no attempt to convince me. No, are you sure? It was like she'd already accepted that this was ending. I was spiraling into a full panic attack when there was a knock on my door. It was Morgan. She was soaking wet. It had started raining at some point, and she clearly hadn't bothered with an umbrella. Her hair was plastered to her face, and she was shivering. "What are you doing here?" I asked, pulling her inside. "I couldn't do it," she said, her teeth chattering. "I couldn't just accept that we were falling apart without fighting for it. I know I'm a mess. I know I'm disorganized and irresponsible, and I lose track of time, and I can't remember to pay my bills on time, and I'm probably the worst girlfriend in the world. But Riley, I love you. And I'm not going to let you walk away without at least trying to make this work." I stared at her, this beautiful, chaotic woman standing in my living room, dripping water on my hardwood floors, and I felt something shift inside me. "You're going to catch a cold," I said. "I don't care," Morgan said. "I care about you. I care about us. And I'm willing to try. I'm willing to be better. Not perfect. I'll never be perfect. But better. For you. Because you're worth it." I grabbed a towel and started drying her hair, and as I did, I realized something important. I didn't need Morgan to be perfect. I didn't need her to be organized or punctual or responsible. I just needed her to care. And she did. She was standing in my apartment, soaking wet, fighting for us. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm sorry for expecting you to change. I'm sorry for trying to make you into something you're not. I'm sorry for not accepting you exactly as you are." "You don't have to apologize," Morgan said, taking my face in her hands. "You were right. I need to try. And I am trying. I'm going to keep trying, because I love you, and that means something to me." We held each other for a long time, and I realized that this was what real love looked like. It wasn't the magical, effortless feeling of the first few weeks. It was messy and complicated and required actual work. But it was also real. It was also worth fighting for. "Stay," I said. "Stay tonight." "Okay," Morgan agreed. And she did. She stayed that night, and the next night, and the night after that. And slowly, we figured out how to make it work. Not by changing who we were, but by meeting each other halfway. Morgan started using a calendar app on her phone to keep track of our plans. I started letting go of my need to control everything and learned to appreciate the beauty and spontaneity. We found a rhythm, a balance between her chaos and my order. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. November 15th, 2024. By mid-November, Morgan and I had settled into a comfortable routine. She'd moved some of her things into my apartment, nothing official, but gradually, her toothbrush appeared in my bathroom, her favorite sweater hung in my closet, her art supplies occupied a corner of my living room. We'd created a space that was neither fully hers nor fully mine, but something in between. My coworkers had noticed the change in me. I was smiling more, laughing more, less rigid in my lesson planning. My best friend Sarah pulled me aside one day after school and asked point blank if I was dating someone. "How did you know?" I asked, surprised. "Because you're glowing," Sarah said. "And you've been wearing that necklace every day, and I've never seen you wear jewelry before. So either you're having a religious awakening, or you're in love." "It's the second one," I admitted. "Tell me everything," Sarah demanded. So I did. I told her about Morgan, about the noise complaints and the coffee shop meetings and the gallery opening. I told her about the fights and the reconciliations, and the way Morgan made me feel like I was living a life instead of just existing in one. "She sounds amazing," Sarah said. "When do I get to meet her?" "Soon," I promised. "I want to make sure things are stable first." But things were stable. More than stable. They were good. Really good. Morgan had been offered a position teaching art at a community center in Williamsburg, which meant she'd have a steady income and health insurance. She was still painting, still creating, but now she had structure. And I'd learned to appreciate her spontaneity, to say yes to last-minute adventures and unplanned dinners. The only problem was that neither of us had actually said the words. We'd implied it, danced around it, shown it through our actions. But we hadn't actually said, "I want to spend the rest of my life with you," or "I see a future with you," or any of the big, important declarations that relationships seem to require. I was thinking about this on November 15th, a Friday night, as I sat in Morgan's apartment, which was now also kind of my apartment, waiting for her to come home from her first day at the community center. She was late, but I wasn't worried. I'd learned that Morgan's lateness usually meant she'd gotten caught up in something she was passionate about, and that was okay. When she finally arrived, she was breathless and excited, her eyes shining with a kind of joy I'd never seen before. "You're not going to believe the day I've had," she said, dropping her bag and pulling me into a kiss. "I taught my first class, and there were these teenagers, and they were so talented, and I felt like I was making a difference, you know? Like my art wasn't just about me anymore. It was about helping other people discover their creativity." I listened as she talked about her students, about the projects she wanted to do with them, about how she'd been thinking about developing a curriculum that combined art with social justice. She was animated and passionate and completely, utterly herself. And I realized that I didn't want to change a single thing about her. "I love you," I said, interrupting her mid-sentence. Morgan stopped talking and looked at me. "What?" "I love you," I repeated. "I know we've been dancing around it, and I know we've shown it in 1,000 different ways, but I need to actually say it. I love you, Morgan. I love your chaos and your passion and your inability to remember to pay your bills on time. I love the way you get so excited about your art that you forget to eat. I love the way you make me want to be braver and more spontaneous and more alive. I love you." Morgan's eyes filled with tears. "I love you too," she said. "I've loved you since that first night when you came up to my apartment and yelled at me about the music. I love you so much it terrifies me." "Why does it terrify you?" I asked. "Because I'm afraid I'm going to mess it up," Morgan said. "I'm afraid that one day you're going to realize that you deserve someone more stable, someone who has their life together, and you're going to leave." "I'm not going to leave," I said. "I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me." "Promise?" Morgan asked, like she was a child asking for reassurance. "Promise," I said, and I kissed her to seal it. That night, we talked about the future. Real, concrete future. Morgan wanted to stay in New York, to keep teaching and painting and building a life here. I wanted to stay too. We talked about maybe moving in together officially, about getting a bigger apartment where Morgan could have a real studio. We talked about the possibility of getting a dog, about traveling together, about all the small, ordinary things that made up a life. "I want to meet your parents," Morgan said as we lay in bed, her head on my chest. "Really?" I asked, surprised. "They're going to think you're insane." "I am insane," Morgan said cheerfully. "But I'm your insane person, so they should get to know me." "Okay," I agreed. "We can go to Connecticut for Thanksgiving. Fair warning, my mother is going to ask you a lot of questions about your career prospects. And I'm going to tell her that I'm teaching art and painting commissions, and that I'm happier than I've ever been," Morgan said. Because it's true. I held her close, and I thought about how much my life had changed in the past 2 months. I'd gone from being a woman who had everything planned out, who believed that happiness came from control and order, to being someone who was learning to embrace uncertainty and spontaneity. And the funny thing was, I was happier now than I'd ever been. "Thank you," I whispered into Morgan's hair. "For what?" she asked. "For being loud at 2 a.m., I said. "For being exactly who you are. For making me fall in love with you." Morgan laughed, that real, genuine laugh that I'd come to love. "Thank you for writing me a passive-aggressive note," she said. "For being exactly who you are. For making me believe that I could have a normal relationship with someone who actually has their life together. We're quite the pair," I said. "The best pair," Morgan agreed, and as I lay there in the dark, listening to Morgan's breathing gradually slow as she fell asleep, I realized that sometimes the best things in life were the ones you never saw coming. Sometimes the person who drove you absolutely crazy was the person who made you feel completely alive. Sometimes love wasn't about finding someone who was perfect for you on paper. It was about finding someone who was perfect for you in reality, chaos and all. December the 24th, 2024. 3 months after that first noise complaint, I was standing in my parents' kitchen in Connecticut, helping my mother prepare Christmas Eve dinner, while Morgan sat in the living room with my father, apparently charming him with stories about her art and her dreams. I could hear them laughing from the kitchen, and I smiled. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind. Morgan and I had officially moved in together, signing a lease on a 2-bedroom apartment in Park Slope that had enough space for her to have a real studio. We'd spent the first week painting the walls, arranging furniture, and making it feel like home. My organized nature and Morgan's creative chaos had somehow merged into something beautiful, a space that was both functional and inspiring. My mother, who I'd been worried would judge Morgan for her unconventional lifestyle, had surprised me by asking her all about her art. My father, who usually had little patience for people he deemed impractical, had spent an hour looking at Morgan's portfolio on her laptop. "She's good," he'd said to me privately. "Really good. And she makes you happy. That's what matters." Now, as I helped my mother with the turkey, she turned to me and asked the question I'd been expecting. "So, are you two going to get married?" "Mom," I said, laughing. "We've been together for 3 months." "And?" my mother asked. "I knew your father was the one after 2 weeks. Sometimes you just know." "Well, I know," I admitted. "But it's only been 3 months. We're still figuring things out." "You're not figuring anything out," my mother said wisely. "You're already figured out. You're just waiting for the right moment." I thought about that as I finished helping with dinner. Was I waiting for the right moment? The truth was, I'd been thinking about marriage. Not in an obsessive way, but in the way you think about the future when you found someone you want to spend it with. I'd catch myself imagining what our wedding would look like. Probably something chaotic and beautiful, with Morgan's art incorporated somehow, and my organized planning keeping it from descending into complete madness. After dinner, after my parents had gone to bed, Morgan and I sat on the couch in the living room, watching the snow fall outside. We were wrapped in a blanket, her head on my shoulder, my fingers intertwined with hers. "Your parents are amazing," Morgan said. I was so nervous. "They loved you," I said. "My mother already told me she thinks you're perfect for me." "Am I?" Morgan asked. "Perfect for you?" "No," I said, and I felt her tense. "You're not perfect. You're messy and disorganized, and you still occasionally forget to pay your bills on time. But you're perfect for me. You make me want to be braver. You make me want to live instead of just exist. You make me happy." "You make me happy too," Morgan said. "You make me want to be more responsible, more present. You make me feel like my dreams are actually possible." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the snow. Then Morgan sat up and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I have something for you," she said. "I wasn't going to give it to you until Christmas morning, but I can't wait." She got up and went to her bag, pulling out a small wrapped box. My heart started racing. This wasn't a Christmas present. I could tell by the way she was looking at me. "Open it," she said, her voice shaking slightly. I unwrapped the box with trembling hands. Inside was a ring. Not an engagement ring. It was a simple silver band with a small painting on it. As I looked closer, I realized it was a tiny version of the painting Morgan had done of me, the one that had been displayed in the gallery. "I know it's not traditional," Morgan said quickly. "And I know we haven't been together that long, and I know you probably want a proper proposal with a diamond ring and me getting down on one knee. But Riley, I can't wait. I can't wait to ask you to spend the rest of your life with me. I can't wait to marry you, and build a life with you, and grow old with you. So I'm asking now. Will you marry me?" I was crying. I was actually crying, which was something I never did. "Yes," I said. "Yes, absolutely, yes." Morgan slipped the ring onto my finger, and then she was kissing me, and I was laughing and crying at the same time. This was so Morgan, unconventional and spontaneous and completely perfect. "I have something for you too," I said, when we finally pulled apart. I'd been planning to give it to her on Christmas morning, but now seemed like the right time. I got my own small box from my bag and handed it to her. She opened it to find a leather journal, the kind artists used for sketching. On the first page, I'd written, "To Morgan, the love of my life. May you always create beautiful things, and may I always be here to witness them. Forever yours, Riley." "Riley," Morgan breathed, tears streaming down her face. "This is beautiful." "I wanted to give you something that was about your art," I said. "Because your art is such a huge part of who you are, and I love that about you. I want to support your dreams and be there for you as you achieve them." We held each other on that couch in my parents' living room, two women who had found each other in the most unexpected way, who had somehow managed to make their opposite personalities work, who had fallen in love despite all the reasons it shouldn't have worked. The snow continued to fall outside, covering Connecticut in white. And inside, wrapped in a blanket, wearing matching rings, we made plans for our future. A future that would be filled with Morgan's chaos and my order, with her spontaneity and my planning, with her art and my support, with our love growing deeper and stronger with each passing day. 3 months ago, I would never have believed that the person who was playing loud music at 2 a.m. would become the love of my life. But that's the thing about love. It doesn't follow a plan. It doesn't announce itself. It just arrives, quietly and unexpectedly, and transforms everything. On Christmas morning, my mother found us asleep on the couch, still wrapped in the blanket, our hands intertwined, our rings catching the light from the tree. She took a photo, and later, she'd tell me it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. And she was right. Because sometimes the best love stories are the ones that no one saw coming. Sometimes the person who drives you absolutely crazy is the person who makes you feel completely alive. Sometimes the love of your life is literally knocking on your wall at 2 a.m., asking if you want to come upstairs for coffee. Sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get to spend the rest of your life with that person. And that's exactly what I plan to do. Kay and Saramento, thank you so much for listening to Riley and Morgan's story all the way to the end. Their journey from neighbors to lovers taught me something really important. The best things in life are often the ones we never see coming. Sometimes the person who frustrates us the most is the person who completes us the most. Here's my advice for you. Don't be afraid to let someone into your life who is different from you. Don't be afraid of chaos if it comes with genuine love. And don't wait for the perfect moment to tell someone how you feel. Sometimes the perfect moment is right now. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything to us, and it helps us continue to bring you beautiful stories like this one. Leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I'd love to know where this story has reached. May you all find your own Morgan or Riley, someone who challenges you, inspires you, and loves you exactly as you are. May you find love in the most unexpected places. And may you never stop believing in the power of human connection. Thank you, and God bless you all.